I'm a dad, shares the comedian Jim Gaffigan. And I always seem a little surprised when Father's Day shows up on my calendar in June. I always look at the third Sunday in June with a little, oh, that's right, Father's Day is coming. That'll be awkward. I hope my 4-year-old gives me another popsicle stick napkin holder. Don't get me wrong, he says I love being a dad, but I don't consider myself especially good at it. I'm not a natural. I didn't spend my 20s dreaming about changing full diapers at 5 a.m., struggling with parental guilt, or existing in constant exhaustion. I don't think anyone does. I'll likely spend Father's Day like any other Sunday with my screaming children. But Father's Day serves as a reminder that I am grateful to be a father, and I have plenty to be grateful for. Being a dad has changed my life. Sure, I'm fatter and balder, but being a dad has made me less self-centered and less selfish. If a baby cries, you can't think, nah, sleep's more important. Essentially, being a father, he says, has made me more human. There are so many opportunities in life to practice being less self-centered and more human, more kind, more generous. Some of the circumstances we get that offer us those opportunities are more desired than others, for sure. And yet we always have choices for how we show up and how we live. This is the essence of the spiritual path, essentially aspiring to live our ordinary lives extraordinarily well. Pema Chodron is a Buddhist teacher I adore because she shares humanizing stories, both big and small, from her own life that illustrate how easy it is to shut down and how freeing it is to open back up. She shared about little things like being at a meditation retreat where she went to the kitchen sink and everyone had been asked to please wash their dishes after themselves, and she sees a mug just sitting there in the sink. So she begrudgingly goes over and picks it up to clean it, and as she turns it over, the piece of masking tape with the person's name on the bottom reveals that it was hers. Who can't identify with that? She also shares about the deep moments of shutting down, one of which for her was when her husband of 8 years pulled into the driveway, parked the car, came around the corner and said, "Things have not been going well for us. I'm having an affair with somebody else, and we need to get a divorce." She said, that moment was so shocking, I suppose even traumatizing. It was just a timeless moment of total, eternal silence. Everything fell apart. I just couldn't get it all to come back together. I wanted it to come back together because for me, happiness seemed to represent just going back to what I had. It represented security. She found herself shutting down, resisting accepting the new reality. She said she found herself facing this terrifying unknown, an experience of grief that took her several years to move through. Looking back, she says, I didn't realize how attached I was to having somebody else confirm me as being okay. In other words, it didn't come from inside me, it came from someone else's view of me. Her willingness and courage to be open enough to allow all she was experiencing, her fear, her pain and judgments, allowed her to also discover this insight and consider that alternative ways of being were possible. By willing just to be with her shutting down, she found a way to open up again and move through it. Life gives us endless opportunities to practice how we show up. And how we show up matters. Rebecca Parker, one of my favorite UU theologians, writes, your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, and waiting. Any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. And any of these gifts can draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question: what will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world. How we hold our feelings, our fears, and motivations, how we respond to the circumstances of our life, it matters. We don't get to control the circumstances, but we can show up with integrity, with reverence and respect for life. And we can inspire opening and closing in others. Ministers are often told we really only have one sermon that we preach over and over again with different stories. And this would be mine. How we show up matters. Let us choose to bless and not curse. As Unitarian Universalists or people new to our tradition, this may be a welcomed reframe of thinking about what does it mean to bless, a word that's traditionally associated with some kind of supernatural intercession or calling God's favor down upon someone. We're talking about a different form of blessing here that works through us. Let's reclaim this word, this practice. Let's celebrate it, live inspired by it. To bless one another is to choose to live our ordinary lives extraordinarily well, to live intentionally with our values. There's a line in a John O'Donohue poem that I came across recently that opens the door to an actual practice in my life to help me not just think these are pretty words, but actually inhabit them and have it change the way I go about my day. And he writes, "May the forms of your belonging in love, creativity, or friendship, may the forms of your belonging be equal to the grandeur and the call of your soul." Basically, may you show up in a way that is aligned with and open to the grandeur of expressing the grandeur and the call of your soul. This imagery has inspired for me a new daily spiritual practice, this and a practice that was shared with me by a congregant. Every morning at 8:30, an alarm goes off on my phone that invites me to set an intention for my day. Now that it's nice out, somewhat, for pregnant women, I go sit outside and I just take in the rustling of the trees and the sounds of the birds until my mind settles. And at some time I start to think about my day, who I will meet, what I might be doing, where I will go, and I envision how I will encounter others. How am I going to approach my life and responsibilities? I envision how can I allow the forms of my belonging today to be equal to the grandeur and call of my soul. I ask what qualities want to express themselves through me. Basically, I ask, how am I going to show up? O'Donohue has also written, as water takes whatever shape it is in, so free may you be about who you become. As water takes whatever shape it is in, so free may you be about who you become. Each morning I now say, may I be as free as water to live into the fullness, the grandeur, and wonder of life. May I move as freely as water into loving kindness, into acceptance, into joy, into whatever it seems will be loving that particular day. This is also what I believe Hillary was saying in her blessing about pastoral care. She celebrates the blessing she receives being a pastoral team member who's called to show up in a way that honors our beliefs about the wholeness of each other. Pastoral team members don't show up expecting to fix or advise anyone, but instead to hold space for our wholeness to make itself known again. It's what we committed ourselves to earlier in the child dedication ceremony. We recognize the wholeness of life in each child. We give thanks and dedicate ourselves to sustain and support the wholeness of those lives. And we offer the children the blessings of the elements, in part as a reminder and a calling to our own spirits to remind ourselves of the grandeur and possibility of life and of these new lives among us. We say the words to call ourselves to take the form of great love in our care and responsibility for the children in our lives. Our nation would be different if our leaders and citizens dedicated ourselves to the wholeness of each child through a national child dedication ceremony. I can picture this. And if we were to do this, we would not so easily accept the denial of basic human rights to parents and their children, including the nearly 2,000 immigrant children who have been separated from their parents during a 6-week period in April and May alone at our borders. The Washington Post reported yesterday that nearly 4,600 mental health care professionals and 90 organizations have joined a petition urging Trump and Attorney General Jeff Sessions, saying that to pretend that children who are separated do not grow up with the shrapnel of this traumatic experience embedded in their minds is to disregard everything we know about child development, the brain, and trauma. It matters how we show up. It matters that we be people dedicated to the wholeness of everyone, called to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people. It matters that we use the gifts we already have in the places where we already go, that we use our gifts to bless rather than to curse. We use them to bless rather than to draw down our border and prison doors. That we don't hoard our bread, abandon the children, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, and withhold love. It's no small thing how you show up in your life. It is no small thing to choose to bless with your life. A colleague of mine at Plymouth Church, I love it, she regularly says, and said at our Amos Economic Summit just earlier this month, that she says that the fundamental religious calling is the basic reminder to love one another. And she often equates that with the reminder to share our stuff. She says, we keep thinking our stuff will make us happy, it will provide meaning, but she's sure that the Bible doesn't preach that the love of money will lead us to salvation. I can use that reminder on a daily basis with the cultural onslaught that tells us that meaning making is made by self-seeking and procuring just the right next thing that somehow will find satisfaction and meaning in our lives. It's a call to curse. The call of our souls, of love, of life, is larger than this experience of greed, of self-seeking, or even nationalism. The call of the spark that brings us life is about becoming, is about growing, changing, moving into the unknown, thriving despite the odds and horrific conditions. It's about moving with, it's about connections and opening. Take a moment to imagine your day aligning with these shapes, allowing your life to move as freely as water into the shape of becoming, of thriving despite challenges, of moving with, of opening. If we move into these shapes, if we align ourselves with something larger and more powerful, we will in time find ourselves less able to pay attention to past hurts, to greed, protection, or reactions. If we make time to think about our day, set an intention, and act like water and become one with the shape and wonder of life that holds and sustains us, we will experience freedom from our egos, freedom from the illusion that we're separate, freedom to see clearly the economic corruption that implores us to hoard and not concern ourselves or let ourselves really feel anything about how others are treated as a result of our choices. When we practice something, we form a habit. A habit becomes a pattern, and a pattern becomes a way of life. Let's cultivate practices that reclaim our wholeness and our belonging in the miracle that is life. Let's align our living with the worth of life, expand our perspective and our bandwidth to open 360 degrees to the connections that we are. Let's live from this reality of our existence that's too often forgotten in our media, by our politicians, or our marketplace. We are a we. We are steeped in belonging and called to grandeur. May we practice shaping the forms of our belonging in ways that equal the grandeur and call of life, of love, of our souls. May we be people who use our gifts to bless the world. Amen. Let's rise and body your spirit as we sing When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.